My greedy parents constantly made excuses for my little sister's bad behavior, allowing her to steal from me whenever she wanted. Anytime I called them out, they turned it around on me, acting like I was the problem instead of her. Things got so bad that my uncle had to step in and force them to do something about it. This all started when I was younger, and I had to fight for anything to be mine alone. As my sister got older, she only cared about one thing: money. She and I both got allowances, and in theory, it was fair since we got the same amount. But the reality was different. I had to do chores to earn mine, while she got hers for free just because she whined enough. My sister, however, always wanted more. She loved shopping for new things, but she also liked just having a stash of money for the sake of it. She wasn't even consistent. Sometimes she'd blow everything on nonsense. Other times she'd hoard it like a dragon. We each got about $20 a month, which I appreciated, and I usually saved most of mine. But my sister, she was always looking for ways to take more. One day, when I was a teenager, I came home to find my room had been ransacked. The only thing missing? My savings. I had hidden it carefully, knowing my sister's habits, but she managed to find it anyway. The worst part? My mom was home when it happened. There was no way she didn't hear the chaos, but she acted completely oblivious. When I confronted her later, she just started making excuses about my sister being sensitive and not like you. That is until my uncle got involved and wouldn't let her weasel out of it. My bedroom was right off the main hallway, fully visible from the kitchen. There was no way my mom didn't see or hear what happened. I pointed this out, but she just repeated her excuse like a broken record. I demanded my money back, but my parents only doubled down, acting like I was being unfair. My dad wasn't any better. When he got home, he also took my sister's side, refusing to admit she had done anything wrong. But I refused to back down. Eventually, after a lot of arguing, they relented. I could hear my sister screaming as my parents dug through her drawers and handed me back my stolen money. But instead of apologizing, they looked at me like I was the villain, like I had somehow robbed her. The hypocrisy was unbelievable. They couldn't even scold me because they knew I was in the right. I wish I could say that was the end of it. But a few months later, it happened all over again. My sister tore through my room and stole all the money I had saved. This time, my parents didn't even try to pretend to be fair. They outright said they couldn't stand to see her sad by making her give it back. I felt like I was losing my mind. I pointed out that stolen money wasn't hers to begin with, and that letting her keep it was ridiculous. Instead of listening, my dad just yelled at me to go to my room. That was the final straw. The next morning, I got on my bike and rode straight to my uncle's house. I told him everything, and he immediately drove me back home to confront my parents. He asked them point blank if they really let my sister steal from me without consequences. My mom just started whining about how my sister was sensitive and easily upset. My dad backed her up, but my uncle wasn't having it. He gave them both the coldest stare and reminded them that they had two kids, not just one, and that what they were doing was setting my sister up to be a spoiled, entitled adult with zero respect for boundaries. He then asked me outright how much she had stolen. I told him the amount, which at that point was everything I had, aside from a few loose bills in my wallet. My uncle turned to my parents and just stared at them, waiting for them to do the right thing. My parents made a few more excuses, but my uncle shut down every single one. Finally, my parents stomped into my sister's room, and moments later, she was shrieking at the top of her lungs. My parents came back, looking furious, and practically threw my stolen money at me like I had done something wrong. My uncle then gave them a piece of his mind, calling them out for enabling my sister's awful behavior when I had done nothing wrong. They begrudgingly picked up all of my money that they had thrown at me and gave me a half-hearted apology. My uncle warned them that he would be extremely disappointed if they ever let this happen again. Before he left, my uncle suggested I keep my money at his place in a locked drawer that only I had the key to. I agreed and started storing all my savings there. My sister ended up tearing apart my room 2 more times looking for cash, but she found nothing because I had already moved everything. My parents even started questioning where I was hiding my money, but I refused to tell them. I couldn't believe they were seriously asking, so I turned the tables and asked why they were so desperate to know. My dad immediately got defensive, but my mom calmed him down and they didn't press me about it again. Since she couldn't find my money in my room, my sister assumed I had hidden it somewhere else in the house. So she started tearing through every single room, one by one. And guess who had to clean up the mess? Of course me. My parents blamed me for everything. But when I asked how it was my fault for not letting my sister steal from me, their only response was that she was sensitive and couldn't handle being told no. I swear, I had heard that excuse 1,000 times. I brought this up during a big family intervention, and it was clear no one outside our household agreed with my parents. The final straw came when my sister trashed my parents' bedroom. They had a small lockbox in their closet with some emergency cash inside, and my sister locked herself in their room, grabbed the entire thing, and started slamming it against the floor and furniture to break it open. She couldn't find the key, so she just went full destruction mode. By the time my parents managed to force the door open, the entire room was in chaos, but the safe was still locked. My sister was sitting on the floor, clutching it, sobbing that she wanted the money inside. My dad was so furious that his face turned red, and to my complete shock, he actually yelled at my sister and punished her, something I almost never saw happen. Then my parents forced her to clean up the mess. After that, my sister never destroyed my room or theirs again looking for money. But she still kept searching, so I decided to mess with her. I started acting like I was hiding my money in random places by constantly going in and out of certain spots when she was watching. She tore apart the backyard shed, dug a bunch of holes in the yard and under the porch, and even made a mess of the attic. My parents lost it over the attic and grounded her again. Eventually, my parents figured out I was keeping my money at my uncle's house. But they didn't argue once they heard my reasoning. Either my sister overheard or my parents let it slip because the next time we visited, she immediately started snooping. My uncle caught her in the act, yelled at her to stop, and she just sat on the floor and cried. This happened a few more times before my uncle flat out told my parents that if she damaged anything, he'd press charges. He even kept a digital camera nearby to document any incidents. After that, my parents finally scolded my sister, telling her she needed to stop looking for my money. It wasn't hers, and she wasn't entitled to it. This, of course, led to another meltdown where she screamed that she needed it. Eventually, she decided she didn't want to visit my uncle's house anymore, and my parents stopped taking her as often. My uncle, however, visited our house frequently, so I still saw him all the time. I was able to keep my savings away from my sister until I moved out, and she never managed to steal from me again. What a miserable situation to be in. If your sister really has difficulty understanding boundaries, then your parents should have stepped in and helped her learn that stealing isn't acceptable. Letting that kind of behavior slide is only going to harm her in the future. There is absolutely no excuse for your parents to ignore the issue just because she gets upset. You would think after the first few incidents, they would step up and act like responsible parents. But instead, they tried to blame you. How on earth could this possibly be your fault? You were just trying to save your own money, while your parents enabled your sister's behavior. And ironically, it wasn't until she tried to rob them that they finally put their foot down. It's ridiculous that it took that long for them to get the message. But good for you for keeping your money safe, and for finally getting out of that house. That must have been exhausting to deal with, and I'm sure it's a relief not to have to keep your money at your uncle's house anymore. It wasn't even a serious argument, but we both let it escalate way too far. Basically, the night before, I was playing PlayStation with my cousin, and I decided to have a couple of hard seltzers while we played. I didn't think much of it. I was at home, just relaxing, not getting wasted or going out. My girlfriend and I had already said goodnight, and she lives in a completely different time zone, so I didn't see any reason to mention it. Well, in the middle of the night, she wakes up because her cat was making noise, and she texts me saying she can't fall back asleep. We're just chatting like normal until I casually mention I'm gaming and having a few drinks. Suddenly, she's upset. Her first response is, "You didn't tell me you were drinking." I tell her it's nothing, just a few casual drinks while playing video games, and that I'd only had 3 over a few hours. She fires back with, "That's a lot. Why didn't you tell me?" I was caught off guard and just said, "My bad. I didn't really think I needed to. I'm literally just at home. If I were out partying or getting hammered, sure. But this, it felt so unnecessary." At that point, I felt a little attacked, but I just let it go. The next morning, I brought it up, saying I didn't appreciate how she came at me. It was just a chill night, and I don't see why I had to be interrogated about it. Instead of actually responding, she just hits me with a facepalm emoji. That set me off a little, so I got sarcastic, which led to her snapping back with, "Don't start a fight for no reason." Things spiraled from there. She got mad at me for being sarcastic, said I was acting immature, and honestly, yeah, I probably overreacted. But I was frustrated because this wasn't the first time. She made me feel like I had to justify everything I did. There have been so many times in our relationship where she expected me to update her on every little thing, stop what I was doing to cater to her, and honestly, it just felt controlling. Anyway, we both dropped it and moved on with our day, texting like nothing happened. I figured it was just a dumb argument, a misunderstanding. So the next day, trying to be mature, I decided to apologize not for drinking, but for my reaction. I sent her a message saying, "Hey, I'm sorry for how things went down. I could have handled it better." This was after we had stopped fighting and were back to normal. I thought it was the right thing to do, but apparently, it wasn't, because she replies with, "I need time to think." I told her, "Okay, I'll give you space. Let me know when you want to talk." And then she completely ghosted me for 5 days. When she finally reached out, it wasn't to talk things through, it was to break up with me. And not just that, she put everything on me. She claimed I was hiding things from her, that I was rude and needed help. Like what? Where was this coming from? She said I had pushed her to the breaking point. And as proof, she brought up things from years ago. For context, I've been to therapy for my ADHD and anxiety, and I worked really hard to better myself. I used to struggle with anger, and yeah, I hurt her in the past, but that was years ago. I went to therapy, I put in the work, and I changed. And yet, she's still using those old mistakes against me, like I haven't done everything in my power to grow. Now, one argument over something so minor is her excuse to say I'm too much. Her biggest complaint? That I'm not in therapy right now. I just graduated college. I don't have a job lined up yet, and I can't afford therapy at the moment. I've explained this to her multiple times. I told her I'm actively job hunting, working on getting insurance so I can go back, and that it's just a temporary situation. But to her, that doesn't matter. Apparently, if I'm not constantly in therapy, I'm not doing enough. How is this fair? How is this my fault? She's the one who blew things up over nothing, treated me like I was sneaking around when I was just living my life, and then left me on read for 5 days before dumping me. What do I even do now? I definitely have to side with the original poster here. The way the girlfriend is reacting to something so insignificant is honestly ridiculous. From what it sounds like, this guy's anger issues were a thing of the past. It's not fair for her to hold that over him, when he's clearly worked hard to improve himself. It seems like she didn't care about the progress he's made, and instead, used it as an excuse to pin everything on him. That's really immature, and in my opinion, doesn't make her a good partner. It actually sounds like she was just looking for an excuse to end the relationship and was waiting for the right moment to bring up all the stuff that was already resolved. She's dragging things from the past that have no relevance anymore and throwing them in his face when he's worked so hard to better himself. That's really toxic behavior, and honestly, I'm relieved he got out of that relationship. Who needs someone like that? It's incredibly draining to be with someone who constantly brings up your past mistakes, especially when you've actively tried to change. He deserves someone who's going to respect him and treat him better than she did. Good for him for walking away, because he definitely doesn't need that kind of negativity in his life. Now, moving on to another situation, my mother-in-law is incredibly overbearing, and it's driving me nuts. I've been with my husband for 6 years. Married for 3, and we're expecting our first baby, a little boy, in just a few weeks. I met his mom early on in our relationship, and I really liked her at first. She was fun to hang out with, and we had a lot in common. However, there's something that's been bugging me for a while. Now, I've been a vegetarian since I was 10, by choice, and it's always been a part of who I am. When I first met his parents, we would go to restaurants, and it was little things, like her asking if I was sure I wanted the dish I ordered or offering to split their meals. Sometimes she'd wave chicken or a steak in front of me and say, "Doesn't it smell good?" At first, I thought she was just trying to be nice, maybe a little clueless, but I let it slide because I'm used to that kind of behavior. Once my husband and I got engaged and married, we started spending more time at his parents' house since they lived just a few streets away. I was actually excited about it because I've never had a traditional family, and I've always wanted to be part of one. But every time we had dinner there, it was always something with meat in it. And my mother-in-law, despite knowing I can't eat meat, would cook everything in goose fat or add bacon to the veggies, claiming it gave them a better flavor. My husband repeatedly told her that if we were going to eat there, the meal had to be vegetarian or we'd go to a restaurant or eat at our place instead. I always tried to stay polite, even when I was frustrated. Things would go fine, and we'd avoid conflict. But once I got pregnant, it made me rethink my relationship with her. As soon as she found out I was pregnant, she started hovering around me. At first, I was looking forward to spending more time with her. I don't have a mom of my own, so the idea of having that maternal support during pregnancy was bittersweet. But then, it quickly became overwhelming. She was always offering to help, but the way she tried to push meat on me, it's like she just couldn't respect my choices. I'm trying to keep things together, especially with everything going on with the pregnancy, but I'm struggling to figure out what to do next. I know she means well, but at this point, I feel like I'm being suffocated. How do I set boundaries without feeling like I'm being ungrateful? She's just trying to clean the house and help us prepare for what feels like an eternally long pregnancy, and it's really making me uncomfortable. I'm craving some space, but she's constantly on top of me. I know she's excited to be having her first grandchild, but she asks me, "How's the little man? And when do I get to meet my baby?" Like 100 times a day. Some things she says even feel kind of creepy, like when she remarks, "I bet nothing fits you anymore," or "I swear, you get a little bigger every time I look at you." It felt invasive, and since I've always had body issues, it really got to me. Now that I'm almost full term, the comments haven't slowed down. It's the usual, "You're ready to pop." But the other day she said, "You look like you were ready to have that baby yesterday. How do you even have any room for him anymore? You're huge." It really bothered me. A few days ago, we were talking about making dinner, and my husband and I agreed one of us would cook, but she insisted she wasn't going to make a pregnant woman slave away in the kitchen, as if I don't cook for myself every day when she's not here. My husband, who's been 100% supportive of me through all of this, finally sat her down and told her that she absolutely couldn't keep doing that. She apologized and promised that she wouldn't cook meat anymore and would make vegetarian meals when she insisted on cooking. At first, I thought I was losing my mind, thinking maybe she was trying to force meat on me again, or worse, trying to poison me. When my husband confronted her again, she admitted that the meatballs weren't veggie, but were actually made from pork, which I haven't eaten in nearly 20 years. My body immediately rejected it, and I got so sick. We had no choice but to throw her out of the house. Now she keeps trying to come over and contact us, begging me to forgive her. I don't know what to do anymore. She's been so nice to me, but it's clear that she doesn't respect my boundaries when it comes to food. And it's getting exhausting. For someone who is strictly vegan or vegetarian, any kind of meat can make them violently ill. This is a very specific dietary restriction, and if she knew that and still tried to feed me pork, it's not just disrespectful, it's dangerous. I honestly think what she's doing is disgusting and incredibly disrespectful. She's ignoring my clear boundaries and completely disregarding the fact that I simply cannot have meat in my system. Kicking her out and telling her not to come back sends a very clear message. When you set boundaries and someone blatantly ignores them, they need to face the consequences of their actions. If she can't respect my choices, then she needs to understand that she's not welcome in my home. Otherwise, this will keep happening, and who knows what she'd try next.